Shadow Secretary of State Luke Pollard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I rise in support of Amendments 1, 11, 16 and 17. And I'd like to send my best wishes on Amendment 18 for a speedy recovery. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also declare an interest that my little sister is a farmer in Cornwall, and I would like to thank all the farmers for their work throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. This is a crucial moment for British agriculture. Today, members on both sides of this House are being given a choice about what kind of country we want Britain to be. Do we want to be a nation that shines as a beacon across the world, standing up for our farmers, standing up for the welfare of our animals and standing up for the environment? Or do we want to throw that all away, just for the vague promise of a trade deal, where poor quality food is served to our children, where standards are undercut, where carbon and animal welfare responsibilities are exported? I don't want to see Britain be the kind of country where our farmers are forced out of business, decimating our proud rural tradition. Madam Deputy Speaker, I don't think there's anyone in this House who wants lower quality food on our plates. But unless the government shows some leadership and backs British farmers, I think there's a real risk that that could happen. Labour has been clear that the Agriculture Bill must include legal guarantees that our high UK food and farming standards won't be undercut in post-Brexit trade deals, whether with the USA, Australia or any other country. And that's because Labour backs our British farmers. And that's why I want to speak not only for Labour in calling for food standards to be put unequivocally in law, but also on behalf of the 1 million people that signed the NFU's petition on food standards, and of course on behalf of the British farmers from Cornwall, Plymouth and Devon, to the east of England, to Wales, to Scotland, when I say put high food and farming standards into law, do it now, do it today. It may seem a long time ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, but less than a year ago, in their manifesto, the Conservatives made a pledge on food standards. This is how it started. In all our trade negotiations, we will not compromise on our high environmental protection, animal welfare and food standards. And this is how it's going. Our farmers risk being undercut by cheap imports from abroad within months. If the government is serious about keeping its manifesto promise to safeguard standards, it should put that guarantee into law. If this promise was good enough for the Conservative manifesto, why is it not good enough for the Agriculture Bill, the flagship piece of legislation around food and farming from this government? I must say to the Minister, refusing to put this part of the manifesto into law does beg the question about whether that part of the manifesto was truly meant and whether that promise can be believed. Undercutting our farmers at the very moment that farm support payments are being radically overhauled creates a lot of uncertainty for those working in agriculture. Farmers are already facing massive uncertainty over our trading relationship with the EU, our biggest export market for agricultural products. They're up for the challenge of decarbonising food production. They largely back the new farm payment scheme, as Labour does, although I think more detail on that to be published shortly would go a long way to building support amongst farmers for it. But all that goodwill will be for naught if ministers allow the economic foundation of farming to be washed away. And they do so by rightly holding our farmers to high standards while opening a back door to the import of lower quality food. Madam Deputy Speaker, Labour MPs tonight will back amendments that protect Britain's food standards. We back them not just because they're the right thing to do, but because we've listened to farmers and we stand alongside them. The party opposite, save for a brave, courageous few, must now look carefully at what they'll be voting for tonight. This bill needs cool heads, not firm party whips. I saw a lot of members on the benches opposite pose for photos for Back British Farming Day in September. Every day should be Back British Farming Day. And on this day, when our farmers need us, we have a chance to see who are the real friends of farming, who are there when the weather is bleak, when a job needs to be done, and who is there only when the sun shines. Let's see them. I'm happy giving one.
Why does the honourable gentleman think that so few British farmers vote Labour? Is it because they recognise Labour as being a metropolitan elite outfit?
Well, I'm grateful for that intervention, because it gives me a chance to say that we back our British farmers. And when it comes down to it, tonight our farmers will be looking at the votes cast in this place. They will be looking to see if those members of Parliament, be they red or blue, that represent farming communities, of which there are farming communities across both sides of this house here, whether they support British farmers or whether they choose not to. That will be a decision for each and every member, but let me be absolutely clear. Farmers are watching what happens in this debate tonight. They're watching what votes are cast, and their votes are not secured for the next election. They're there to be played for, and I look forward to that competition. Happy giving way.
If the right honourable gentleman is making a really great series of points, and on that point, I'm sure he would humbly accept that in the election last December, Conservatives made gains from his party in many urban parts of Britain because the characterisation that Labour had taken those seats for granted. Isn't the same thing on the table here tonight? That we have large swathes of blue in rural Britain that the Conservatives just assume will vote for them come what may? Isn't the lesson of tonight that many Conservative MPs will be in the same position as his colleagues were in December at the next election?
I'm grateful for that intervention, and I thank him for it. I think the important thing that I've taken away from my discussions with farmers in Devon and across the country on visits to farms up and down the country is that their votes are not guaranteed. The votes of rural communities are not guaranteed. And actually, they're there to be won. But they need to be won through a strong vision and through delivery. And taking votes for granted is not a good electoral strategy anywhere. And what we need to look at here is what will farmers benefit from and what will they not benefit from. And I worry that leaving a back door to our farmers being undercut in trade deals is neither a good economic strategy for our country, nor is it a good political strategy for those people advocating it. Let me make some progress now, if I can. Madam Deputy Speaker, I expect the amendment to strengthen the Trade and Agriculture Commission to be redrafted in the Lords, and I hope it will come back to us soon. Amendment 16 on strengthening the Trade Commission and Amendment 18 on food standards are a 1-2. They're a classic British double act. I don't believe that the temporary and fragile Trade and Agriculture Commission would be able to stop the International Trade Secretary, Dominic Cummings and the Prime Minister, signing a trade deal with America that would include imports of clonated chicken and hormone-treated beef. That's why, when we're looking at this, we need that 1-2, a strengthened scrutiny of trade deals and also a protection for our farmers in law. That's happy giving way on that point.
One of the very important facts that the Shadow Minister is referring to is the importance of the agri-food sector for us in Northern Ireland. We've built up the regulations, we've built up a standard which is we've sold the world over. Does he share my concern that if we push, and I hope that the Shadow Minister will push Amendment 16, because that will ensure that our products will retain their standards the world over and will not be lost within this deal? Does he share my concern along those issues?
I thank the honourable member for that intervention, and I do share concerns around the quality of food that could be imported after post-Brexit trade deals are done, unless there is a legal lock into it. I'll give way to the gentleman there, then I'll make lots of progress.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. And I absolutely support the points he makes about the importance of farming and the importance of a long-term vision to support our farmers. And tonight's debate will, I think, be very significant for us and for the farming sector in the future. Does he agree with me that consumers are very concerned about these points, and that consumers are concerned both about the quality of our food and the risk of a backdoor, but they also have concerns about the viability of our farms?
I thank the honourable gentleman for that mention. I think I agree with that concern, because British consumers have spent decades arguing for increases in animal welfare in our agricultural production. They have spent decades choosing to put their faith in those brands and those supermarkets and those products that have higher levels of animal welfare than others. And I think that is a concern that does exist. Now, let me make some progress if I can. I want a trade deal with America, but it's really important we don't pay for that trade deal with the livelihoods of our farmers. That's why the Commission needs to be strengthened, providing extra scrutiny of standards, and we will need an amendment that locks those standards into law. I want to see the Commission, as the member for Totnes hinted at in his intervention, put on a permanent statutory basis which produces a report on every trade deal to be voted on before this House. Our farmers feed the nation. The least they should expect is that their elected representatives have the opportunity to vote on whether to accept a trade deal that could devastate the economy. The Minister is right that it doesn't require a bill to set that up, which means that it only requires a choice to set that up. And that is a choice that the government has chosen not to make.
Will you take an intervention?
I will, but then there's my last one.
I'm extremely grateful for him for giving me, because I think it's just an important point. Increased accountability would actually strengthen the hand of UK negotiators. I remember scrutinising the TTIP deal between the EU and the US in Washington, and one of our last meetings was with their food lobby, and they told us nothing is going through Congress unless we agree with it.
Well, I agree with him. I mean, at least it is a phrase that ministers from Britain won't have to utter, that it won't get through Parliament, because Parliament has sadly voted itself out of having a say in this, making Parliament one of the few parliaments in the world that won't be having a say on any trade deals with Britain. Let me look at briefly what some of the reasons that the Minister gave for not including these amendments, because I think it is important that we look at what the argument is. Earlier last week, I heard the International Trade Secretary talk about if we have high standards, there's a risk of crippling effect on agricultural exports from developing countries around Kenya. And I know that this is a point that members will feel concerned about. But the problem is, it's not right. If we look at the moment, the government has 9 trade deals, thanks to our membership of the EU, with sub-Saharan African countries. And so far, not a single one of them has been rolled over. So we risk losing those trade deals with sub-Saharan Africa if we don't renew them by the 31st of December. If we care about agricultural exports, that should be the priority. The Minister also knows that the government should have a better plan for improving the post-Brexit UK's versions of the EU's generalised scheme of preferences, which sets lower tariffs for developing countries in exchange for meaningful protection of human rights, labour rights and the environment. So what else is on the excuse of why their promise can't be put into electoral law? The Minister mentioned labelling in there. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've spoken proudly of the need to buy local from this dispatch box. I want consumers to look out for the Red Tractor and other local accreditations when they're making purchasing decisions. But let's be real. An extra label won't stop lower quality food from being sold in Britain. It offers a meagre apology on the packaging, but only where there is packaging. Because ministers know that 50% of our agricultural production doesn't go into retail, it goes into food service, to cafes and restaurants, food processing and the like, where the origin of ingredients is hidden at best. This is precisely where chlorinated chicken would be sold and eaten first. It would go to big caterers, into mass production, into places consumers could not tell where the food has come from and the standards it was produced to. It would go into hospital food, meals for our armed forces and our schools. The government claims that it's unnecessary because standards are included in the Withdrawal Act, as we've just heard. However, the EU's import restrictions only apply to products banned on the basis of safety, and as mentioned in the discussion, it doesn't deal with animal welfare or environmental protections, which is what this amendment seeks to do. And there's one more excuse that hasn't been spoken about so far, but is absolutely key to the government's future trade strategy, and that is about taxes. Couldn't ministers just tax these products a wee bit more and have the extra couple of pence on tariffs and let the market decide? Something I've heard and read about in Tory-leading media. But let me be clear with ministers, because all those in this place know what the Treasury and the Department for International Trade are planning. Charging a few extra pence on lower standard food import tariffs, while the public anger is at its highest, will give ministers a convenient soundbite to offer the nation ill at ease with its policy. And they'll be able to drop those tariffs when the anger dies down by secondary legislation. The end result will still be chlorinated chicken and food produced at lower standards on sale, whether it's a few pence more or a few pence less. It doesn't stop those products being sold in the United Kingdom. It authorises it, it legitimises it, and it signs the death warrant for farm businesses the nation over. That's why we want their standards put into law. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the midst of a climate and ecological emergency, it's imperative that we have a clear roadmap for agriculture to reach net zero. The NFU has done a good job with their work so far, and I want to thank farmers for their effort to put into how they cut carbon emissions, which are a sizable chunk of UK emissions. And that's why we back efforts to have sector-specific plans, to have clear plans that farmers can follow. And we also back efforts, including the amendment tabled by Lord Whitty in the other place, on pesticides. This matters not just because of the impact on the environment, but the impact on human health as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, in seeking to disagree with these amendments tonight, I fear that the government may be trying to hint at the Salisbury Convention, which is that the other place should not interfere with manifesto commitments. But the other place, the Lords are doing something different to that. They're doing a reverse Salisbury. They're asking the government to stick to its manifesto commitments. In such circumstances, the Salisbury principle does not apply, and the Lords should ask the Commons to reconsider these amendments on food safety and on the Trade and Agriculture Commission again and again if necessary. Every time this House votes on these amendments, more and more farmers will be looking at the voting list of those members that support the farmers and those that chose not to. We cannot take any votes for granted, and I warn those members opposite that seek to do so. Just last week, the Leader of the Opposition and I visited the farm of NFU President Minette Batters in Wiltshire. This was our second meeting with the NFU President in a month, but the Prime Minister still refuses to meet her. And I'd be grateful if the Minister could pull a few strings to get the PM to meet with farmers to talk about this. Madam Deputy Speaker, what kind of country do we want to be? Happy giving way on that point?
I believe that the President of the NSU will be visiting Downing Street later this week.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, where the Leader of the Opposition leads, the government follows. So I'm grateful for that. So thank you for that. That visit to Wiltshire was not in vain, I see. Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, what kind of country do we want to be? I don't think a country that has its MPs shout at each other in a debate like this is a country that's good. So I haven't heard that from this side, and I would encourage that side to just recognise that as well. There are people watching this debate in farming communities up and down the country who are tuning into BBC Parliament and Parliament Live for the first ever time, and they should see parliamentarians performing at our best in this debate. I want Britain to be a nation of quality, rather than chuntering from sedentary positions. Let me start that one again, because the people at home might not have heard me over the chuntering. I want Britain to be a nation of quality, of high standards, of ethical treatment of animals, of stewardship of our landscapes, a custodian of high environmental standards, and a nation that challenges other nations to compete with us fiercely, but do so on a level playing field. I want Britain to be a beacon country with our values proudly on show, not just in sound bites and manifestos, but in our laws, our trade deals and our behaviours. This is what the amendments on food standards seek to achieve. It's a moral compass that this agriculture bill desperately needs. And it's because of that, because Labour backs our farmers, that we've voted against this bill at every opportunity, because it singularly fails to protect our farmers from being undercut by food produced to lower animal welfare and lower environmental standards abroad. Our farmers are not afraid of competition. But when we maintain high standards for them, but allow potentially food produced to lower standards to be imported, that is unfair. It's not a level playing field. That food would be illegal for British farmers to produce here, but somehow it would be okay to have that through a back door. That can't be allowed, and that's why our food standards must be put into law. I don't think any party should take rural communities for granted. And I respect an awful lot of the voices on the other side, who I haven't heard shouting today, for their work in standing up for their farmers, in trying to convince the ministers in DEFRA and, importantly, the ministers that hold the whip hand here in the Department for International Trade to recognise the importance of putting our standards in law. It is a fight we must continue, and that is a fight that must be continued by those on my side of the House, but equally I encourage those on the other side of the House to do so as well. There is a cross-party concern about food standards. There is a cross-party support broadly for the words that's in the bill about changing our farm support methods. But the words that are missing, that puts our food and farming standards into law, are the ones that we need to focus on. And it's because of that that we'll be voting for the amendments with pride, passion and patriotism tonight.